The world is hungry for healing. Our task is to make the dynamics and conditions available for healing to be possible. My name's Natalia Rachel, and I've been invited here today to talk to you about mental health. I'm not going to talk about the mental health crisis that we find ourselves in, nor am I going to dole out self-care tools for coping and surviving. We've been coping and surviving for far too long. It's part of the problem. It's time to move the needle on mental health and trauma. It's time to heal. Healing and transformation, these are the topics that we are going to explore today. We will look at root cause and effect, systems and dynamics, and most importantly, the role of self-mastery. It is our healing that allows us to become the social impact that the world needs right now, that we all need. We're going to pause along the way to have conversation because conversations are essential for change to occur. But before we get into these topics, I'm going to share my story with you in a very small nutshell because it informs who I am and my perspectives on these topics of mental health, trauma, belonging, culture, and systemic and sustainable change. But before I do that, I'm going to remove my shoes because I'm way more comfortable barefoot. Much better. I've lived through and recovered from some of the worst things I could ever imagine. Since I was age 7, I knew that something wasn't right in my world. I grew up in an abusive environment. Back then, it was all I knew. It was just normal. But the trauma that I experienced then went on to inform the person that I became. My personality, my body, my relationships. I was an amalgamation of coping and surviving techniques. Unconsciously, my mission became about 3 things. 1, to survive. 2, to belong. And 3, to hide, to make sure that nobody knew how I was really feeling, which was terrified, deeply lonely, and brimming with shame. Why am I like this? What's wrong with me? These were the questions I asked myself internally all the time. They are the same questions that many of us wonder about ourselves or wonder about each other. What's wrong with her? Why is he like that? Why are they behaving that way? As an aside, why am I like this? That essential question is the title of my book that is coming out with Penguin Random House next month. When I was 17, I couldn't keep it up anymore. My external or performative shell started to crack and crumble. I became listless and angry. My schoolwork suffered, and I started to talk back to my parents. And I was marched to the doctor's office. Something's wrong with her, make her better, my mother implored. To cut a long story short, I was misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I was put on a triple cocktail of meds, an upper, a downer, and an antipsychotic, just enough to further scramble my already scrambled psyche. And I proceeded to travel further and further away from myself, spiraling into difficult situations, into sexual abuse, and ultimately becoming someone that I didn't recognize. After 4 years of darkness, at the age of 21, a little voice spoke to me inside my head, and it said, "Natalia, this is not who you are. This is not your life. Do something." And so I did. I checked into a rehab facility and I detoxed off all of the meds. And at the end of the muck of it all, there I was, diagnosis free. With the normal stamp of approval, I went back to claim my life. I got a great job in the advertising industry. My boss was amazing and the culture was wonderful. I felt safe and supported for the first time in my life. And within that safety, and in fact, because of that safety, my body started to break down. It started with my gut. One day it just stopped working. And then about a month later, I was at my desk and all of a sudden my right foot just dropped and froze. And as a young woman who had previously been very physically healthy, I was so scared. At the hospital, the doctors told me that I had nerve damage and that I would never walk again. Can you imagine being told that news? I didn't accept that reality. I wanted to heal. I had to heal. So I started to look for answers. But back then, the answers were not readily available, not within the context of mainstream health and mental health care, not within the context of complementary health, and not within the world of spirituality and energy. I looked everywhere. Sometimes I would find something that would help me feel a little bit better for a time or to cope a little bit longer, but it was never sustainable and I never really healed. So I just continued to get sicker and sicker and sicker for 11 years. The illness attacked my immune system, my nervous system, my gut, my fascia, my lungs, and my brain. It seemed that whatever was happening was degenerative. And the doctors told me, if the illness doesn't kill you, the medication will. You'll be lucky to see 40. Those words burned into my brain. Words have the power to trap us in a reality that's not meant for us. They also have the power to emancipate us and set us free. Words are even more potent when they are delivered from the mouths of authority. For a time, I accepted what the doctors told me, and that became my reality. At the depth of my illness, I was on 42 medications per day, and I was having 3 intravenous treatments at the hospital per month. There were periods where I didn't have use of my legs, my hands were in splints, and I couldn't hold my babies. I was a shocking 40-something kilos, weak and lifeless. Now, in the best shape of my life, I am 70 kilos strong, to give you a comparison. I always tried to make the best of it, to grin and bear it, to smile and soldier on. And I got so much praise for being the strongest sick person the doctors had ever seen. And that praise had me continuing to try and fight and ignore the whispers of my body and the calls of my spirit. Until one day I couldn't anymore. When my second child, my son, was 6 months old, my body completely broke down. And I ended up in hospital for 2 months barely functioning, and then in rehab for another 3, learning to walk again. There is something incredibly humbling about being incapacitated and helpless. It gives new meaning to the little, now popular word, vulnerability. In the ashes and the rubble of my pain, that same little voice spoke to me and it said, "Natalia, it is time to heal. There is a different way to be here. Listen." And so I did. I learned to listen to the whispers of my body and to the calls of my spirit, and to not only decode them, but to respond to them. No more smiling when things weren't okay, no more coping mechanisms. I surrendered them all. And as I surrendered, I began to heal. Let me tell you, it was a process to heal my trauma and reclaim my physical, mental, emotional, relational, and spiritual self. But here I am. After I healed, after I got better, I went on to study around the world and work in the field of mental health and trauma. And now my focus is on education and social impact. I'm very pleased to report that I turned 40 this year. So those doctors' words about not making it to 40 are gone from my psyche. My trauma story is not unique. There are millions living similar stories all over the world. My journey to heal is unique. slowly but surely, I created a life full of peace and power where I can show up in ways that are sustainable, authentic, and collaborative. To me, these are the true markers of success. Well-being is success. Internal peace and relational harmony are success. The concepts that we are going to explore together today are distilled from my lived experience. Yes, I'm a therapist and a clinic director, but more importantly, I am an eternal student of self-mastery, and I commit to my healing every single day. Let's talk now about root cause and effect. We do not just wake up one day with mental health symptoms, nor do we all of a sudden find ourselves amidst a mental health pandemic or crisis. They are part of a bigger story. There's context, just like in my story. We experience mental health symptoms when we are either experiencing threat, depletion, or do not have the resources we need to flourish and to thrive. If those symptoms don't resolve with mainstream intervention and a little self-care, it suggests that we are either living in a way or within systems and dynamics that do not support our well-being. Or it may indicate that we are holding unresolved trauma. For many of us, both things are true. In order to really understand mental health, we have to look at the biopsychosocial health model. It suggests that our essential experience of well-being is a combination between our physical health, our mental emotional health, and our relational or environmental health. We are multi-dimensional. We cannot separate these experiences. Our nervous system is the governing system across all of these dimensions. So understanding it is an important point of departure, not only for making sense, but for developing pathways to healing and change. The core question that the nervous system is always asking is, am I experiencing threat or safety? And if the answer is threat, the next question it asks is, well, what do I need to do to get back to safety? Most of our distress and dysfunction derives from an unconscious attempt to seek safety. Understanding ourselves at this level is a really good point of departure for going on to explore the 3 pillars of mental health and well-being. They are 1, capacity, 2, belonging, and 3, authenticity. Let's look at each one of these in a little more detail. My favourite way to talk about capacity is the boiling pot scenario. Imagine that you are a pot of water sitting on a stove with the heat turned up, bubbling and bubbling and bubbling away until you eventually overflow. That's what happens when we live beyond our capacity. We overheat, we burn out, we get triggered, we can't cope. Has anyone ever said or heard that phrase before? I can't cope is a dead giveaway that we are living beyond our capacity. And if we get to a stage where we really can't cope, like I did, we'll end up either exploding or completely drying up. Either way, we're left empty without the resources we need to do very much at all. Most of us are living in either early stage or high functioning burnout. That's the truth. Healing asks us to return to living within our capacity. But because most of us have been living far beyond our capacity for so long, and it's a function of this modern world, when we make the choice and set the boundaries to begin to live in a different way, there will be consequences. Things are going to fall by the wayside or potentially even completely fall apart. The bigger question is, will the people in our lives, at work or at home, will they accept and even welcome our boundaries and our choices to look after ourselves? This brings us to the 2nd pillar of mental health and well-being, belonging. To belong is a biological imperative. We need each other. Our blueprint for belonging is set in our early life relationships. Ideally, we feel welcomed into the world by our mother, our family, our community and culture. This sets the map for our belonging later on. When we belong, we feel safe, seen, heard and welcome. If we didn't get that early on, it makes it very hard to show up later as adults in ways that are peaceful, powerful, self-caring and collaborative. We simply didn't learn how to belong, how to relate. Healing asks us to build experiences of belonging, to redraw the blueprint. But this takes not only work building relationships with other people, it takes work building relationships inside ourselves. Belonging is both a collaborative process and an internal process. And it's not possible without authenticity. Authenticity is the third pillar of mental health and well-being. Most of us are hiding at least parts of ourselves. The me that we feel inside is often very different to the me that we present to the world. And when we fragment or split like this, we lose authenticity and it's impossible to belong to ourselves or anyone else. Healing is about becoming internally inclusive and externally authentic. This is about vulnerability. Vulnerability is really scary, particularly when we live in a world that asks us to smile and perform and to reach for the stars and manifest our reality. It doesn't make it really easy to show up and perhaps share that we're having a bad day or feeling down or just completely uninspired. And these things happen to all of us regularly. The moment that we lose authenticity and suppress parts of ourselves, we're going to feel like something's wrong. Suppression can lead to illness, mental and physical. That was my story. I suppressed all of the trauma and all of the pain, and it showed up in my mental health and my physical health. And I have worked with so many clients who have experienced similar. They have packed away their anger, their grief, their fear, and so much shame. And it starts to seep out into their bodies, into their mental health, or leak into their relationships. Now, not everybody who loses authenticity is going to get sick, but we will feel like something's not quite right. It might be as subtle as a mild sense of disconnection or dissonance, or it might be as loud as the feeling of not belonging in this world, feeling like an imposter or an alien, or like our body doesn't belong to us. We lose authenticity in very small ways every day, and it builds up over time. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how we do it. One is in response to the very common question, we probably get asked this 10 times a day, how are you? Our often inauthentic answer is, good thanks, I'm great. Well, thanks, fine. When sometimes the authentic answer is, actually, I feel terrible and I want to curl up in a ball. I don't want to do anything today. But we don't say it. We lose authenticity. Another way that we commonly lose authenticity is when someone is seeking our agreement or approval. So the question would be something along the lines like, are you okay with that? Is that good with you? And our often inauthentic answer is, yeah, that's fine, great, thanks, no problems. When sometimes what we're really thinking is, I don't agree with that, that doesn't feel fair, but I'm going to hold my tongue in order to keep the peace. How many times do you do that? Per day, per week, per month, per year? How many times do you think your loved ones and colleagues do it? We shift the gross amount of inauthenticity in this world by showing up as the messy, complex humans that we are, even if it's scary to do so. Our vulnerability is the path to the belonging that we all need to heal. I'm going to take a pause here and open up for conversation and questions. Does anybody have anything that they would like to share or ask on what we've covered so far, these 3 pillars of mental health and well-being? Don't be shy, please. I'll take a drink. Are you going to be a quiet group? because I can also just keep talking. Would you like that? Should I just keep talking? All right. Maybe we'll leave every question till the end. Is that better? Cool. Now that we understand the pillars of mental health and well-being, I'm going to talk a little bit about trauma. Back when I was experiencing my mental and physical health issues, nobody was talking about trauma. And years later, when I was growing my health clinics here in Singapore, trauma was a dirty word. Our market research showed that the word trauma was too confronting and it wasn't consumer friendly. So we designed our entire brand that was all about trauma healing without using the word trauma at all. We were a Trojan horse, and we became the go-to place in Asia for people to seek trauma healing, to seek care for conditions that were not resolving with mainstream intervention, just like mine. We had even clients flying from all over the world, but no one was using the word trauma. Fast forward to now, and we can't ignore it anymore. The whole world is talking about trauma. We are living through a global trauma, actually on many levels. Trauma is when a past experience of threat is living and breathing in us now. It is generally unconscious and non-verbal. It's felt. It shows up as sensations, emotions, and relating patterns. And it spreads through families, communities, and cultures. We are really very quick to dole out labels like mental health, and another label I'm not a fan of is the toxic label. Most of our distress and dysfunction that is not resolving with mainstream intervention has an origin of unhealed trauma. And that trauma is contextual and systemic. It's important that we stop labeling, band-aiding, and shaming ourselves and each other, or we will not heal. In order to heal, we need to go to the root of the problem and bring trauma work to the mainstream to make it safe, acceptable, digestible, and just part of life. The remedy to everything that we are experiencing lies in the root, in those same 3 pillars of mental health and well-being that we've explored. In order to begin to live within our capacity, we have to start working with energy sustainability and nervous system mastery. In order to cultivate experiences of belonging, we need to develop relationships not only with other people, but with our fragmented selves. And in order to create a world that is far more authentic and connected, we have to start showing up as the messy, complex humans that we are. It's that simple. These same pillars of mental health and well-being that we can apply to our own healing and self-mastery are the foundation for co-creating a kinder world. When I work with organisations on culture transformation, we draw on these pillars as part of the embodied culture transformation model. We bring together the 3 big buzz conversations: mental health, diversity, equity, inclusion, and sustainability. Remember, we're multidimensional and we can't continue to separate these issues. At the centre of this leadership model is self-mastery. It all begins there. Our self-mastery is the foundation for the change, for the social impact that we're wanting to create. When we make the decision, when we decide to begin to put the boundaries in place in order to change the way we're showing up and relating in the world, there will be chaos, destruction, distress, and dysfunction. But it's temporary. And our task is to cast our vision forward and hold ourselves and each other through the process. This is known as healing crisis. Please take note of the word boundaries. I've said it a few times. All healing work comes back to boundaries. Boundaries are a line in the sand. They are a choice, an intention, and a commitment to realise it. I've made a couple of epic transformations in my time. All of them started with a boundary. The first was from sick to well. The second was to leave a marriage of nearly 20 years. Both times my life completely fell apart. but the chaos was necessary for me to create something new. I know the energy of transformation very well. So as we witness the world turning on its head, and we are doing somersaults right now, it's as if I know it. We are being given an opportunity to do things differently, to create something new. We need to begin to draw boundaries around our energy, around our relationships, and our authenticity. We need to do this for ourselves, and we need to do it for each other. Everything that we want to create for ourselves and each other comes back to our own self-mastery and healing. Here are my 6 suggestions for getting started on your journey. Number 1, know your stuff. Own your stuff. Explore your why. Understand your existential blueprint and all of the ways that you are unconsciously seeking safety and belonging. This is the starting place for all transformation work. Number 2, master your nervous system. Our nervous system is the central place of our experience, so it can be very, very powerful to understand and to begin to work with it. If this is new for you, you can find resources on my website and also check out my free somatic meditations on Spotify. 3, be better with boundaries. Boundary work is an epic process. It can be very confronting and it happens in layers. You can begin by starting to look and notice where all the places where your boundaries are lacking are, and see what it would be like to begin to resurrect and reinstate them. 4, make peace with your parts. Tune into all those parts of yourself that you have packed away, that you've suppressed. Listen to their stories. See what it would be like to welcome them into your compassionate care and cohesive expression. 5, process your emotions. Emotional intelligence is not just about being able to name or label an emotion. It's about being able to tune in to ourselves and all the ways that we have perhaps suppressed emotions and how they are colouring the way that we experience and express in the world. And 6, most importantly, extend empathy and compassion to ourselves and each other on the journey. When we heal, we are in uncharted territory. We might take 1 step forward and 2 steps back. We might make a giant leap and then find ourselves back in an old black hole. We need to take time. There's process, learning, unlearning, relearning, and we need to be gentle with ourselves. Our kindness is the greatest healing elixir of all. The goal of all of our work, whether it's for ourselves or each other, is to embody peace and power. And in fact, the final part of my book, Why Am I Like This?, is called Embodiment, the Laws of Peace and Power. It shares everything that I believe we need to live by in order to create an experience of internal peace and relational harmony. So if that's something that's of interest to you, you can get that QR code and check out more information and pre-order. Peace and power is the goal. So as we close the speaking part of our session and move towards sharing and questions, let's take a shared moment of intention to move towards peace and power now and with every breath we take. Thank you.